Members of the White House party said Mrs. Kennedy's first thought then was to be with her children, Caroline, 6, and John Jr., who will be 3 next week, and who, at last report, were at the White House in Washington. Mrs. Kennedy was taken to Love Field in Dallas, and there, on the plane that carried her to what had been a personal triumph for her in Texas, she joined witnesses as Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn into office as Chief Executive of the United States. The casket of her husband was placed aboard the plane. Mrs. Johnson, the new First Lady, embraced Mrs. Kennedy, and she rode back to the Capitol with the new president. We are going to return you to WBAP-TV, Fort Worth, and Charles Murphy with some film that was made at the hospital where the president died. So to WBAP-TV, Fort Worth, and Charles Murphy.
Late films have arrived in our newsroom from Dallas showing the scenes of horror and disbelief outside Parkland Hospital. Newsmen hurry to the emergency room. The president's wife arrived, stunned. This is Mrs. Kennedy, in the middle. At this point, no one knew whether the president was alive or dead. Mrs. Kennedy conferring with a Dallas policeman who had sped the president to the hospital and into the emergency room goes Mrs. Kennedy. A corsage of roses lies inside the car in which President Kennedy was shot. A stunned Congressman Jim Wright of Fort Worth tells what he saw from a few cars back. The disbelief registered on every face. These films from outside the emergency room of Parkland Hospital in Dallas as the president is dying inside. Senator Ralph Yarborough, who saw the shooting, said he heard shots and then saw a Secret Service man pound his fist against a rear fender of the presidential car in anguish. 2 priests arrived to administer last rites. Their names are not yet known. The deed still is not registered with many outside the hospital. And the horror begins to sink in. We'll be back with more films from Dallas as soon as they arrive. Charles Murphy, WBAP-TV, Fort Worth, Dallas.
There is this reaction to the death of President Kennedy.